how many people here have heard about DarkFi before? DarkFi? The project I will present. No one, or very few, very few.
DarkFi?
DarkFi, yeah. Okay, it's new to you guys, so I'll try to break it down. Then also, just as a kind of general context, how many people here would describe themselves as technical? Okay, so many more people than know about DarkFi. And how many people, out of curiosity, would take a more like anti-tech stance? Wow. Fair enough. So that's the majority of people, I'd say. Just saying for the live stream. Okay, so I'll get started with the talk. This talk is going to have two basic parts. First, I'm going to tell you a bit of a story as context about trying to understand how we've gotten to this point that we're at now. So what are the processes and patterns that have brought us here, and trying to analyze that a little bit. And then in the second half of the talk, I will introduce you to the project that I work on, which is called DarkFi, and why. So I'm hoping you'll kind of follow my logic as to why I see this as potentially helping to reverse some of these patterns and processes that we see playing out over the last 500 years and more. Okay, so this is a graph of some data that I collected. This graph indicates, so it shows in the corner there, you can see that the different lines represent different countries. So there's Ireland, Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. These are tracking the number of local governance structures per capita since 1900 and up until 2020. So what we see here is a kind of like shocking and steady decline in the number of governance structures per capita in all of these countries. And I will also point out that this is a kind of a snapshot of a local environments, places that are close to us, but it's representative of a much broader global process. And it's not just the local governance structures that have declined over the past 100 years. There's many graphs that I could pull up that look something a little bit like this. For example, if we were to start trying to measure the decline in linguistic diversity, so like the different languages being spoken, the religions being practiced, the cultural kind of richness of societies. If we were to track ecosystem biodiversity, the number of species, plants and animals, we would see similar downward kind of trends, a similar kind of downward spiral. So it's a snapshot of a broader phenomena, but it indicates there's this process that's ongoing that I call desertification. So it's kind of like a tendency towards the more simple, the more globalized, and the kind of less pluralistic and multi-centered phenomena. So I wanted to point that out. I also want to mention this is a snapshot of 120 years, but if we were to zoom it out over the past 500 years, I think we'd see an even more kind of stunning image. So I want to give you an insight into what happened over the past 500 years and more recently over the past 100 years that have led to this kind of these global processes of decline and what I call desertification. So this is a one angle on a multifaceted story that doesn't even start 500 years ago, but in fact starts more like 5,000 years ago. But we're just going to take this simple view on it today. So we have, in the past 500 years, the emergence of what has been called nationalism, but we can also call it nation-stateism, because nationalism is kind of a loose term, describes many things. So it's more about there's a particular type of way of organizing society with the nation-state at the center that really came into the fore over the past 500 years. And before that, there was a different thing. There was feudalism. And before that, there was kind of the Roman Empire and different kinds of empires. So the past 500 years has been this nation-state era. And what's interesting about this kind of nation-state, modern nation-state era, is that we see this feedback loop that I've illustrated here on the slide. So in the early stages of the nation-state era, we have countries kind of developing this new image of themselves, which is a kind of expansionist identity. So they want to become a global empire, essentially, modeled on Rome, and they have this sense that they are of the place that defines freedom, and the people within their kind of constituency are free, and they want to expand the freedom that they offer into other countries. So this is what can be called imperialist nation-stateism. So it's a kind of expansionary nation-stateism that wants to kind of subsume other countries into its remit. So England is a good example of this, the early stages of the British Empire, which was very expansionary and had this notion that England was a free place, its citizens were free, and England could free other places by taking them over. And this is part of the process that happened of like the loss of language, the loss of cultural diversity, even the loss of biodiversity. A lot of this comes from there. But what's interesting in this loop, I mentioned on the slides, is that the imperialist nation-stateism gives rise to a kind of reactionary form of nation-stateism from the countries that were invaded and so on. So what happens is initially the nation-state, the first kind, expands, and then the people inside those nation-states that have been kind of taken over by the imperialist nation, they realize that they are a province in an alien dominion that they don't want to be part of. And they start this process of, we want to be our own nation, and we want to be our own nation state. And this is a kind of liberatory nation stateism, which emerges in, so the example that I gave earlier was England as a kind of classic example of the imperialist nation. And then you have these other nations like Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Isle of Man, who are forming this kind of liberatory nation-stateism in reaction. So they say, we want to have our own nation-state, we don't want to be part of that one. But what's kind of tragic about this feedback loop and this cycle is that they're trying to reverse the processes of desertification that have been imposed on them. But by reverting to the same model of nation-stateism that was introduced to them by this new kind of invading force, they are actually accelerating, and they take part in accelerating those processes of desertification. So again, to give you an example, in Ireland, there was the Irish language was the extinction process was first set into place by the British invasion, but then it was really kind of segmented by the Irish government who and their failure to kind of emphasize the importance of the language, and through the Irish government, this process of subsuming everything around the centre, and this loss of local governance structures, and with the loss of local governance structures, the corresponding loss of cultural diversity, of ecosystem biodiversity, and all these desertification processes. So what's really interesting is that coming up to the millennium, these kind of liberatory nationalisms or nation-stateisms, which are concerned with kind of overcoming the imperialist legacy, start to realize this. and they start to realize that actually, it's contradictory to solve the problems placed that have been created by the nation state with other nation states. So they start to question, what are the things we can do? How can we genuinely reverse these processes and kind of restore power to the peripheries? There's some kind of a paradigm shift that happens in the thinking around this that I think we're all kind of partaking in, which is presenting us with potential solutions and ways out from this global desertification process. And that's something very interesting. So how do we begin to reverse these processes? So there's at least two parts. One is affirmative, and the other is creative. So there's a need to affirm the people's power, and what I mean by that is part of how these processes have become so embedded is because by taking people's power away, you're also giving them the mindset of a disempowered mindset. So it creates a kind of feedback loop where they become, you take the power away and it actually makes them more kind of less sovereign in more than one way. So they become less sovereign by virtue of having less power, but also because they begin to think in a less self-sovereign way. So by affirming and restoring the people's power, we're already doing something to kind of regenerate that necessary agency that people need over their lives. It's by surveilling people and turning them into the kind of masses and the mass consumers that are extracted from and kind of fed on by global capitalism, they literally become that thing. So part of reversing these processes means, affirming the genuine kind of like liberty and potential of humans to take their own power back and to start living in a self-sovereign way. So, that's kind of where DarkFi comes in. We don't need permission to do this. We don't need to wait for anything to happen. We can do it, and we are, and you are, by asking these kinds of questions. So we have the tools today to actually start living in a genuinely self-sovereign way and begin to restore this kind of lost richness of culture, society that have occurred. The very act of building and living this world that we're describing and that we long for, the very act of doing that radically reorientates the world toward a multi-centered, pluralistic paradigm that is like a great forest, where there is no center of power, there is no imperial center sucking value from its peripheries, the center is everywhere. So DarkFi, I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, is a project which tries to provide tools to do this. It is a kind of crypto blockchain project which is focused on coordination tooling. So that means we need to build tools such that people can organize in a way that is free and self-sovereign and permissionless, and that is censorship resistant. So that means that there's no risk of some imperial center trying to shut down or take over what you're doing. That's the goal of what we're building. So anonymous coordination software, that means we have an anonymous chat, which is the most, in my opinion, anonymous chat on the market. So we use encryption. It's fully peer-to-peer. So there is no central server. You can run it over Tor, which means you can avoid the metadata analysis. So it's a highly anonymous, decentralized chat. And alongside this, we also have task management systems so that you can plan and execute projects with other people. We also have, how many people here know what a DAO is? Okay, so it's like, maybe 40%. So a DAO is a crypto kind of phenomena, which is basically, it allows any group of people to coordinate around a treasury. So it's a way to spend money in a collective way. So it's very useful if you're a movement or a project that wants to allocate funds in a decentralized kind of community way. But typically on normal crypto, this is all fully public. On DarkFi, we can do it in a way that is completely anonymous, aside from the people who are partaking in that community. So you're not announcing your activity to the world in the way that you would currently. So this is the kind of heart of DarkFi's offering, is a DAO and a chat and a tasks that are centered around these notions of anonymous coordination. This is a bit technical. I don't think I'll go into this. I want to leave a bit of time for questions. Again, pretty technical stuff, but it just explains how we achieve anonymity and privacy on DarkFi. We have these different layers to the software stack. We use something called zero-knowledge cryptography. Later, we want to expand. We're really a kind of hub where we're innovating in the area of cryptography and what we call anonymous engineering. So that's like, what are the new apps we can build using the zero-knowledge technology, which is a highly kind of privacy-preserving innovation in cryptography. And it works really well in a peer-to-peer context. So that means like, communities can really make use of these tools to live and act in a self-sovereign way. So to kind of reorientate the conversation towards something more practical, we are also working on our first product. So DarkFi itself has got many different components, but it ties together in a product that we're working on now at the moment, which you can think of as a kind of anonymous peer-to-peer Telegram. So it's like Telegram, but it's peer-to-peer, so you're not sending your messages to some server that that could be handed over to whatever government that asks for the data. It's just whoever's running the network stores a copy of the network, but it's also encrypted, so you're just sharing that information with the people that you want to. The goal here, the first version is the chat. So it's very much like Telegram, but we're adding these plugins. So we have anonymous task management systems. I mentioned the anonymous DAO. And the vision is, you have a kind of a Telegram type interface where you can easily, with your community, make use of these tools. And it's cross-platform, so it can be on your phone, on your computer. We aim to support, many different kinds of hardware. So that's kind of the vision of what we're building. So, we're called DarkFi. I like to say the dark, has been kind of falsely aligned with like things which is scary and sinister. That's another example of a kind of a misinformation and a corruption of the true nature of darkness. Darkness is about fertility. It's about regeneration. The darkness of a forest or ocean, or even of the darkness of space. Dark is something that's full of potential and full of mystery and beauty as well. So that's what we mean when we say DarkFi. And we have a little phrase, "Let there be dark," and for me it means let there be life. So let there be dark. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got some time for a couple of questions. So, straight in there. Cool. Running. There we go.
Thank you very much. What role, if any, do you see for AI in your technology and platform?
Sure. So I'm a bit nervous about AI as it currently is, because, you know, AI is kind of like a Leviathan type like monster that we've created from all of our data that we've basically amassed. And a lot of the AIs that are popular are the ones which are completely surveillance based and just kind of preying on people. And people don't even realize that the whole kind of conversation, you know, they're these friendly kind of conversations that they're having, but that is the actual kind of the whole time the AI is just like collecting information from them. So it's like this kind of malignant like data monster that's just like absorbing all the humanity's data into it. So I'm a little bit concerned about that aspect of AI. But there are self-sovereign AI models that you can run on your computer and privately, you know, interact with them. So that's for sure, and you know, and it's for sure also that AI is here, and there's no kind of going back from that. So I think that there are useful ways that we could use AI. For example, one that came up was. We're very focused on anonymity and privacy at the level of like peer-to-peer encryption. So, you know, a third party can't read your data. But we don't think about the thing of like, what if you have someone's messages and you can actually do probabilistically, especially with AI, even if you don't know where the message came from or who sent it, you could analyze the style of the writing. And you can say, oh, we can recognize, because that person keeps a blog, for example, we can match the patterns that unconscious to them that come across in both the blog and the text, and then they can say probabilistically, we think it's this person. So what would be really nice if we could have on the DarkFi Telegram product, like a plugin which would allow a kind of a randomizer of the messages, so it's scrambling your style as you're writing. That's something that AI could do, you know. Then there's probably other interesting ways, but it's not my area. But I do think it's one of those things where, you know, it's technology has the tendency to it gets invented somewhere and eventually it just kind of spreads, and you know, it has all sorts of unexpected aspects. So I'm a little bit scared of the AI, but I'm sure there's going to be some parts that are actually quite liberatory that I'm not prepared for, you know, because that's just the kind of nature of technological disruption. So we'll see what happens there.
One more quick question. I know we got a lot. You're going to have to come talk to her. Here, we'll get one from you.
Hi. Oh, gosh. Thank you so much. Could you please give maybe one or two like real-world relatable examples of how people are using your technology? Because it's all really interesting, and then I'm like, well, what does that mean, and how might we collectively engage with it? That would be helpful. Thank you.
So I can give a practical example from my own experience, which is because the last speaker brought up the Julian Assange. So Assange, there's a whole kind of history of how crypto has supported him throughout the years. But most recently, in 2021, a group of us created something called the Assange DAO. And I mentioned DAOs before. So basically, the Assange DAO, our motive was we wanted to free Assange by all means necessary. And that was around the time where it wasn't looking good for Assange. They had approved some extradition to the US, and his health was really bad. He just had a stroke. So a bunch of us got together online and we said, we're going to free Assange. And the way that we're going to do this is through a DAO. So basically, it went a bit viral, and a lot of people sent money towards this DAO. And eventually, it aggregated some 55 million that was gathered in this treasury in support of Assange. We ended up sending that money to a foundation which paid for all his legal fees. They did some really interesting kind of legal cases that I don't have the details on, but I think they did stuff like suing the CIA. So they did some really interesting things, and I need to write an article on that. But the end kind of result was that Assange, was freed. So we bankrolled that the last 3 years of that through this DAO. So that's a real example. It's not the perfect example, in that, I think the DAO could have been used much more in a much more interesting way. We wanted to be a prison break DAO, but instead we became a legal fees paying DAO, which wasn't really our intention at the beginning. But it's still it's something real, and maybe that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Rose. Are you going to hang out throughout?
Yeah, I'm here.
So she's going to be around. Give her a big, big round of applause. Lots of amazing things going on here.